Jake Morrison stood at the big window of Earth Station Alpha and watched the last alien ship disappear into the darkness of space. The ship looked like a silver needle as it jumped into hyperspace and vanished completely. He knew this was the end of something important. The Galactic Council had made their final decision, and there was no going back now. The trouble started 6 months ago, when Captain Lisa Kane refused to give up a planet her crew had found. The planet was beautiful, and green with clean water and good air. The people who lived there were dying from a terrible sickness, and Lisa knew humans could help them. She called the planet Haven because it looked like a safe place where people could live happily, but the Zephyrian Empire wanted the planet for themselves. They did not care about the sick people who lived there. They only wanted to dig up the valuable metals under the ground and cut down the forests to sell the wood. When Lisa said no, they got very angry and complained to the Galactic Council. Dr. Amanda Brooks had studied the sick people on Haven through her medical equipment. She found that their sickness was something human doctors could cure very easily, with medicine they already had. She showed her research to the council members and explained how humans could save thousands of lives. But the aliens did not want to hear about saving lives. They wanted to talk about rules and profits and keeping things the way they had always been. The council was controlled by old alien races, who had been in charge of the galaxy for thousands of years. They made all the important decisions about which planets could be used for mining and which species were allowed to travel between the stars. Humans had only joined the council 20 years ago, and many aliens still thought of them as young and stupid. When the council met to discuss what happened at Haven, the chamber was full of angry alien voices. The Zephyrian representative was a tall creature with gray skin and 4 arms who spoke in a voice like grinding metal. He said humans were dangerous because they cared more about helping other species than following the rules. Other council members agreed and said humans were causing problems everywhere they went. The hegemony delegate was even worse. She was from a race that looked like giant insects with sharp claws and black eyes. She said humans were too emotional and could not be trusted to make good decisions. She pointed out that humans had already broken several council regulations by sharing their technology with primitive species and refusing to hand over resources they had found. President Richard Hayes tried to defend humanity during the emergency session. He was a calm man with gray hair who had been dealing with aliens for many years. He explained that humans believed in helping others and that this was not a bad thing. He said the council should be proud to have members who cared about saving lives instead of just making money, but the council had already made up their minds. The vote was not even close. Out of 47 council species, only 3 voted to support humanity. The rest voted to place humans under a communication embargo. This meant all human ships were banned from council space. All trade agreements were canceled, and all communication channels were blocked. The alien ships that had been stationed near Earth for diplomatic purposes packed up and left within hours. Trade vessels that had been bringing alien goods to human colonies turned around and went home. The massive communication array that connected Earth to the galactic network was shut down by council technicians who worked quickly and said nothing to the humans watching them. Jake Morrison watched it all happen from his position on the space station. He had been serving as a liaison officer between humans and aliens for 5 years. He knew many of the aliens personally and had considered some of them friends. But when the embargo began, they stopped talking to him completely. They looked through him as if he was not there and acted like they had never met him before. Dr. Amanda Brooks was devastated when she learned that the people on Haven would not receive help. She had been working day and night to prepare medical supplies and train doctors who could treat the plague. Now all of that work was wasted because humans were forbidden from returning to the planet. She knew thousands of innocent people would die because the council cared more about rules than lives. Captain Lisa Kane was ordered to return to Earth immediately. Her ship, the New Horizons, had been exploring the outer regions of the galaxy and discovering new worlds for possible human settlement. Now she had to come home and could not continue her mission. When she arrived at Earth, she was angry but not surprised. She had known the council would punish humanity for doing the right thing. President Hayes spoke to the people of Earth and all the human colonies through emergency broadcasts. His speech was shown on every screen in human space and recorded for history. He stood behind his desk in the White House and looked directly into the camera with serious eyes. He said the Council believed silence would break the human spirit. They expected humans to come crawling back after a few months, begging to be allowed back into their exclusive club. They thought humans could not survive without alien technology and alien trade routes. They were sure that isolation would teach humans to be more obedient and follow council rules without question. But President Hayes said the aliens had made a terrible mistake. They did not understand what humans were really like. When someone told humans they could not do something, humans did not give up. They worked harder and found new ways to solve their problems. They did not beg for help from people who had betrayed them. They helped themselves and became stronger in the process. In the deep underground laboratories of the Lunar Research Facility, Dr. Benjamin Clark was already starting work on projects that would change everything. He was a brilliant scientist who specialized in advanced physics and engineering. He had been studying alien technology for years and learning how it worked. Now he would use that knowledge to build something better. Dr. Clark smiled as he looked at his research notes. The aliens thought they were punishing humanity by cutting them off from galactic civilization. But they had actually given humans something very valuable: time to grow and develop without interference. Time to become something the galaxy had never seen before. Jake Morrison took one last look at the empty space where the alien ships had been. Then he turned away from the window and walked toward the communication center. There was work to do and messages to send to human colonies across the galaxy. The silence had begun, but it would not last forever. And when it ended, the galaxy would never be the same again. 2 years had passed since the Council cut off all contact with humanity. The aliens expected humans to be desperate and begging for help by now. Instead, something amazing was happening in every human colony and research station across the galaxy. Engineer Rachel Davis stood in her laboratory on Luna Base 3, looking at a device that should not have been possible. It was a communication array that could send messages instantly across the galaxy without using any of the Council's networks. She had been working on quantum entanglement theory for months, trying to find a way to connect human worlds without alien permission. The breakthrough came when she realized that alien communication systems were actually very old and limited. They relied on massive relay stations that the Council controlled completely, but quantum entanglement worked differently. 2 particles could be connected no matter how far apart they were, and when one changed, the other changed instantly. No relay stations needed, no Council control possible. Rachel activated the device and sent a test message to the human colony on New Terra. The message traveled 300 light-years in less than a second. When the reply came back just as quickly, she knew humanity had taken its first step toward true independence. Within weeks, every human world was connected to the new network. Dr. Kevin Torres was working on an even bigger problem in his physics lab on Earth. Humans had been using alien hyperspace drives for 20 years, but these drives required navigation beacons that the Council controlled. Without access to those beacons, human ships could not travel safely between the stars. Dr. Torres was determined to change that. He spent months studying the mathematics of hyperspace travel and testing new theories about how space and time worked. The alien drives were powerful but crude, like using a hammer when a scalpel was needed. Dr. Torres designed something much more elegant, a drive system that could navigate by reading the natural structures of space itself. The first test flight was dangerous but successful. Captain Susan Wells piloted the experimental ship through hyperspace without any alien beacons to guide her. The new drive was not only safer than alien technology, it was also faster and used less energy. Human ships could now go anywhere in the galaxy without asking permission from anyone on the agricultural world of New Terra. Administrator Peter Grant was solving the problem of food production. The Council had cut off all trade, which meant humans could no longer import the exotic foods and rare nutrients they had grown to depend on. Many people worried that the colonies would starve without alien supplies, but Dr. Helen Price had been studying alien agriculture for years, and she knew their methods were wasteful and primitive. She developed new growing techniques that could produce more food in less space using fewer resources. Her genetically improved crops could grow in almost any soil and resist diseases that destroyed alien plants. The results were incredible. Food production increased by 300% in the first year. The hydroponic farms Dr. Price designed could feed thousands of people using only a small amount of water and energy. Soon, human colonies were producing more food than they could eat, and Peter Grant was planning to expand to new worlds. The most important discovery happened by accident when Captain Susan Wells was testing the new hyperspace drive she was exploring, a region of space that the Council had marked as empty and dangerous. Her sensors detected something unusual near a small red star, artificial structures that were clearly built by intelligent beings. The beings called themselves the Keepers, and they had been hiding from the Council for thousands of years. They looked like tall humans with pale blue skin and large eyes that seemed very old and wise. Their leader was named Guardian Thel, and he spoke to Susan in perfect English, which surprised her greatly. Guardian Thel explained that the Keepers were the oldest race in the galaxy. They had been keeping records and preserving knowledge since before the Council existed. They had watched the Council grow from a small alliance into a massive empire that controlled most of the galaxy. Through fear and greed, the Keepers had vast libraries containing the true history of the galaxy. They showed Susan records proving that the Council had destroyed hundreds of civilizations and enslaved entire species. The Council claimed to bring peace and order, but they actually brought only death and exploitation to any world that had something they wanted. Most shocking of all, the Keepers revealed that there were many other species hiding from the Council. These species had formed a secret network to help each other survive and resist Council rule. They called themselves the Underground, and they had been waiting for someone strong enough to challenge the Council directly. Susan immediately contacted Earth and shared this information with President Hayes and the military leadership. General Patricia Adams was especially interested in the Underground, because she had been building Earth's defenses and needed allies who understood how the Council fought their wars. The Keepers agreed to share their knowledge with humanity in exchange for protection and supplies. They gave human scientists access to technologies that were far more advanced than anything the Council possessed. These technologies had been developed by civilizations that the Council had destroyed long ago. Benjamin Clark was amazed when he saw the Keeper archives. The aliens in the Council had been telling everyone they were the most advanced species in the galaxy, but this was a lie. The Council had actually stolen most of their technology from other races. After destroying those races completely, the Keepers also revealed something that changed everything. The Council's power was not as strong as it appeared. Their empire was held together by fear and propaganda, not by genuine loyalty. Most of the species in the Council wanted to be free but were too afraid to rebel because they thought the Council was too powerful to defeat. Commander Chris Taylor led the first official diplomatic mission to meet with the Underground. His ship, the Silent Thunder, was equipped with the new stealth technology that made it invisible to Council sensors. He traveled to secret meetings on hidden worlds and established formal contact with dozens of oppressed species. The Underground was much larger than anyone had imagined. It included the aquatic dolphins whose homeworld had been strip-mined for rare crystals, the silicon-based aggregate whose collective consciousness had been broken apart by Council scientists, and the plant-like Verdani whose forest worlds had been clear-cut for expensive lumber. All of these species had been suffering under Council rule for centuries. They had valuable resources that the Council wanted, but they were not strong enough to resist alone. When they learned that humans were building a resistance movement, many of them volunteered to help however they could. Back on Earth, the changes were visible everywhere. New factories were producing advanced technology at an incredible rate. Shipyards were building vessels unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Research centers were developing weapons and defenses that combined human creativity with alien science. The isolation that was supposed to weaken humanity had made them stronger than ever before. They had allies, advanced technology, and most importantly, they had hope. The galaxy was about to learn that silence had not broken the human spirit. It had given humans time to prepare for war. The discovery of the Keepers changed everything for humanity. Through their ancient records, humans learned the terrible truth about how the Galactic Council had risen to power. The Council was not a group of wise leaders keeping peace in the galaxy. They were criminals who had built an empire by destroying anyone who stood in their way. Dr. Michelle White became humanity's first ambassador to the Underground Network. She was a skilled diplomat who spoke several alien languages and understood how different species thought and communicated. Her job was to make contact with all the hidden civilizations that were fighting against Council rule. The Underground was much more organized than humans had expected. They had been working together for thousands of years, sharing information and helping each other survive. Each species had different strengths and abilities that made them valuable to the network. The aquatic dolphins were excellent at hiding underwater and could travel through ocean worlds without being detected by Council sensors. The dolphins had once lived on a beautiful water world covered with coral cities and floating gardens. Then the Council discovered that their ocean floor contained rare crystals needed for advanced electronics. Council mining ships stripped away the seafloor and poisoned the water with toxic chemicals. Millions of dolphins died, and the survivors were forced to live in small underwater caves. Captain Joe Parker began running secret supply missions to help these oppressed worlds. His ship, the Shadow Hawk, was equipped with the new stealth technology that made it invisible to Council patrols. He carried human medical supplies, food synthesizers, and defensive weapons to species that desperately needed help. The aggregate were even more tragic. They were silicon-based beings who shared a collective consciousness that allowed them to think and act as one unified mind. This made them incredibly intelligent and creative, but the Council saw their unity as a threat. Council scientists developed a virus that attacked their neural connections and broke their collective mind into millions of isolated individuals. Now the aggregate lived in confusion and pain, unable to communicate with each other properly. They had once been one of the most advanced species in the galaxy, but the Council had reduced them to scattered groups of confused beings who could barely remember who they used to be. Dr. Michelle White worked with Keeper scientists to find a cure for the neural virus. The Verdani were perhaps the most heartbreaking of all the underground species. They were plant-like beings who lived in massive forest cities that grew naturally from the ground. Their trees were not just homes, but living beings that the Verdani could communicate with directly. The forest sang with beautiful music that could be heard across entire continents, but the Council wanted the Verdani's special wood for building luxury ships and furniture for wealthy aliens. They clear-cut entire forest worlds, destroying not just the trees but the Verdani themselves, since they were connected to their forests in ways that other species could not understand. The few surviving Verdani lived on hidden worlds, growing small groves and mourning for their lost civilization. Lieutenant Colonel Maria Lopez made the most important discovery while studying Council communication networks. She found that the entire system was built on ancient technology left behind by a species called the Founders. The Founders had disappeared millions of years ago, but their technology still controlled most of the galaxy's infrastructure. The Council had never fully understood how the Founder technology worked. They just used it without really knowing what they were doing. Dr. Nathan Rogers, working with Keeper Archives, realized that humans could not only hack these systems, but could do it in a way that would look like natural equipment failures. This was incredibly important because the Council's power depended on their ability to communicate across the galaxy instantly. If humans could disrupt those communications, they could cause chaos throughout the Council Empire. Enemy fleets would lose contact with their commanders, supply ships would get lost, and rebellions could start before the Council could respond. Admiral Frank Carter was building humanity's first real battle fleet in the outer regions of human space. The ships were unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. They were fast and heavily armed, but their most important feature was their adaptive artificial intelligence systems that could learn enemy tactics during battle and develop counters in real time. The flagship was called Earth's Vengeance, and it was 3 times larger than any human ship ever built before. It carried weapons that combined human kinetic principles with energy systems taken from captured Council technology. The main gun could punch through the armor of a Council dreadnought with a single shot, but Admiral Carter knew that winning battles was not enough. Humans needed to win the war, and that meant getting the entire galaxy to rise up against the Council at the same time. The Underground brought disturbing news that made this urgency even greater. The Council was planning to attack a world called Sanctuary that served as a refuge for species fleeing Council oppression. Thousands of beings from dozens of different races lived there, including survivors from worlds the Council had already destroyed. The attack would serve as a warning to anyone thinking about resisting Council authority, intelligence reports said. The Council was sending 12 massive dreadnoughts and over 100 support ships to destroy Sanctuary completely. They planned to bombard the planet from orbit until nothing was left alive. Then they would broadcast recordings of the destruction to every world in the galaxy as a lesson about what happened to those who defied the Council. Commander Jake Morrison, now serving as the main liaison between humanity and the Underground, knew this was the moment of truth. Humans could continue hiding and building their strength, or they could reveal themselves to save innocent lives. The choice was not really a choice at all, because humans could never stand by and watch genocide happen when they had the power. To stop it, Dr. Amanda Brooks was working frantically to prepare medical supplies for the refugees on Sanctuary. She had learned that among them were survivors from Haven, the original world that Captain Lisa Kane had tried to protect. The Council had destroyed Haven anyway after forcing the humans to leave, claiming they needed the planet for resource extraction. This news made the coming battle personal for every human involved. They had tried to follow Council rules and it had not mattered. Innocent people had died because humans had been too weak to protect them. Now humans were strong enough to fight back, and they would not make the same mistake again. The Underground was ready to emerge from hiding, but they needed someone to lead the way. They needed a species that was strong enough to face the Council directly and win. After years of preparation and alliance building, humanity was ready to become that species. The silence was about to end, and when it did, the galaxy would learn what happened when you left humans alone for too long. They did not just survive isolation, they used it to become something far more dangerous than the Council had ever imagined. The Council fleet heading towards Sanctuary was the largest military force assembled in over a century. 12 massive dreadnoughts led the attack formation, each one capable of destroying an entire city with a single blast from their main weapons. Behind them came cruisers, destroyers, and support ships carrying enough firepower to turn a planet into burning rock. Admiral Vexstar of the Hegemony commanded the fleet from his flagship, the Iron Fist. He was a veteran of dozens of campaigns, where the Council had crushed rebellious worlds. His reputation for cruelty was known throughout the galaxy, and he took pride in leaving no survivors when he attacked. The Council had chosen him specifically because he would not hesitate to kill every living being on Sanctuary. The refugees on Sanctuary had no military defenses worth mentioning. They were scientists, artists, farmers, and families who had fled their homeworlds when the Council came to exploit or destroy them. They had built a peaceful community in the mountains and valleys of their adopted world, growing food and sharing knowledge from dozens of different cultures. When the Council fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Sanctuary system, Admiral Vexstar expected to see a defenseless world waiting for destruction. Instead, his sensors detected something that should have been impossible. Human ships were already there, formed up in battle formation between the Council fleet and the planet. Admiral Frank Carter stood on the bridge of Earth's Vengeance and watched the Council ships emerge from hyperspace. His fleet was much smaller than the enemy force, but every human ship was equipped with the most advanced technology their species had ever created. The moment he had been preparing for during 4 years of silence had finally arrived. "Admiral." Vexstar opened a communication channel, his voice filled with contempt and amusement. He spoke in the common galactic language that all spacefaring Species understood, though his accent made the words sound harsh and threatening. He demanded to know what humans thought they were doing in council space and ordered them to withdraw immediately or be destroyed. Admiral. Carter's response cut through 4 years of enforced silence like a knife through cloth. His voice was calm and steady, but every word carried the weight of human determination and barely controlled anger. He identified himself as Admiral Carter of the Terran Defense Force and gave the Council fleet exactly one chance to withdraw before, facing the consequences of their actions, the alien admiral's laughter echoed across the communication channels. He had fought primitive species before and always won easily. Human technology was decades behind Council standards. Their ships were smaller and fewer in number, and their military experience was limited to small conflicts. Admiral Vextar saw the coming battle as target practice for his gunners. His laughter stopped abruptly when the first Council dreadnought simply vanished from his sensor screens. The massive warship had been there one moment and was gone the next, torn apart by weapons that Admiral Vextar had never seen before. The quantum torpedoes developed by human scientists hit their target before the enemy even knew they had been fired. The battle began in earnest as both fleets opened fire simultaneously. Council energy beams lanced through space toward the human ships, but the adaptive armor developed by Dr. Jennifer Cole absorbed the impacts and converted the energy into power for the human weapon systems. Kinetic projectiles bounced harmlessly off hull plating that had been designed to withstand anything the Council could throw at it. Human ships moved through the battle zone with coordination that seemed almost supernatural. Their artificial intelligence systems had been studying Council tactics for years, analyzing every recorded battle and developing counters for every known strategy. When Council captains tried to outflank the human formation, the AI predicted their moves and positioned human ships to intercept them perfectly. Captain Susan Wells commanded the stealth wing of the human fleet, leading ships that could appear and disappear from enemy sensors at will. Her pilots struck at Council supply vessels and communication ships, cutting off the enemy fleet from their commanders and leaving them confused and isolated. Without proper coordination, the larger Council force began to fall apart. The human Marines who boarded disabled Council ships were unlike anything the aliens had ever faced. Their powered armor made them nearly invulnerable to handheld weapons, while their training and determination allowed them to fight with precision that terrified their enemies. Captain Lisa Kane led these boarding actions personally, securing enemy vessels with minimal casualties on both sides, but the most devastating attack came from an unexpected direction. Dr. Nathan Rogers had spent months preparing viral programs that could infiltrate Council communication networks through their own quantum entanglement systems. When he activated these programs during the battle, every Council ship suddenly lost contact with their fleet commanders and found their navigation systems giving false readings. The confusion was total and immediate. Council ships began firing on each other because their identification systems were showing false signals. Navigation computers led ships into collision courses with their own allies. Weapon systems locked onto friendly targets and refused to respond to manual overrides. Admiral Vextar tried desperately to restore order to his fleet, but his own flagship was infected with the human virus. His communications officer reported that they were receiving contradictory orders from multiple sources claiming to be fleet command. His navigation officer said their position readings were changing randomly every few seconds. His weapons officer could not target the human ships because the computer insisted they were actually Council vessels. When the surviving Council ships attempted to retreat, they discovered that their hyperspace drives would not function properly. The quantum disruptors that Dr. Benjamin Clark had developed were broadcasting interference patterns that made safe hyperspace travel impossible. The Council fleet was trapped in normal space with a human force that seemed to anticipate their every move. The battle lasted less than 6 hours, but it changed the balance of power in the galaxy forever. Half of the Council fleet was destroyed or disabled, while the remaining ships surrendered rather than face complete annihilation. Human casualties were surprisingly light. thanks to their superior technology and tactical preparation, but the real victory came when Dr. Amanda Brooks made contact with the refugees on Sanctuary. Among the thousands of beings who had found shelter on the peaceful world were survivors from Haven, the planet that Captain Lisa Kane had tried to protect years earlier. The Council had destroyed their homeworld anyway after forcing the humans to leave. Claiming they needed the resources for the war effort, these survivors had been living as refugees for 4 years, mourning their lost world and believing that no one would ever stand up to the Council on their behalf. When they learned that humans had come to protect them, many of them wept with relief and gratitude that someone finally cared enough to fight. For the innocent, the galaxy watched in shock as humanity's silence ended not with words of negotiation or compromise, but with decisive military action that proved the Council could be defeated. The underground emerged from hiding across dozens of worlds, emboldened by the human example and ready to fight for their own freedom at last. The news of the defeat at Sanctuary spread across the galaxy faster than the Council could stop it. For the first time in thousands of years, someone had stood up to their military might and won decisively. Panic gripped the Council chambers. As emergency meetings were called and desperate messages flew between the homeworlds of the major species. Counselor Zethran was the supreme leader of the Council and had held power for over 2 centuries. He was an ancient being from the hegemony whose species had dominated galactic politics since before humans had discovered fire. The defeat of Admiral Vexstar was not just a military loss, but a direct challenge to everything the Council represented. Within days, every available warship in the galaxy was recalled from patrol duties and border stations. Trade routes were abandoned as merchant vessels were pressed into military service. Rebellions that had been simmering on dozens of worlds were left unchecked as Council forces concentrated on one target: the complete destruction of humanity and everything they had built. The armada that assembled was truly massive, numbering in the thousands of ships. Every major warship the Council possessed was there, supported by vessels conscripted from member species who had no choice but to obey Council orders. Some species contributed ships reluctantly, while others volunteered eagerly, hoping to curry favor with their overlords by participating in the destruction of the troublesome humans. Counselor Zethran took personal command of the fleet. Aboard his flagship, the Eternal Dominion. The ship was a monument to Council power, larger than most space stations and armed with weapons that could crack a planet's crust. He had never personally led a military campaign before, but the situation was too important to trust to subordinates who had already failed once. The Armada's destination was Earth itself, the homeworld of humanity and the symbol of their defiance. Zethran planned to make an example that would be remembered for millennia. He would destroy every human world, enslave any survivors, and broadcast the carnage across the galaxy to show what happened to species that dared to challenge Council authority. But when the massive fleet arrived at the edge of the Sol system, they found something that defied all their intelligence reports. Earth's solar system had been transformed into a fortress unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Defensive platforms surrounded every inhabited world, bristling with weapons that tracked the approaching ships. Clouds of automated defense drones patrolled the outer system. Like a swarm of angry insects, the moon had been converted into a massive shipyard that was producing new vessels at an impossible rate. Factories and construction bays covered the lunar surface, protected by energy shields and defensive batteries. Ships were being launched every few hours, adding to the already substantial human fleet that waited in formation around Earth. Captain Susan Wells led the first line of defense with her stealth ships, using hit-and-run tactics that the Council fleet found impossible to counter. Her pilots would appear from nowhere, strike at vulnerable targets, and vanish before the enemy could respond. Supply ships exploded, communication arrays were destroyed, and command vessels found themselves isolated from their fleets. As the Council armada pushed deeper into the system, they encountered wave after wave of human defenses. Admiral Patricia Adams had spent 4 years turning every asteroid and moon into a potential weapons platform. The space around Jupiter was filled with mines that looked like ordinary rocks until they detected enemy ships and activated their explosive charges. The real surprise came when the Council fleet reached the inner system and faced the main human battle force. Admiral Frank Carter commanded a fleet that had been built not just for war but for total victory. Human vessels swarmed around the larger Council ships like wolves attacking a herd of cattle, their superior speed and maneuverability allowing them to strike at weak points while avoiding return fire. The battle for Earth became the largest space engagement in galactic history. Thousands of ships fought across millions of cubic kilometers of space, while weapons fire lit up the darkness like artificial stars. The energy output from the battle was so intense that it could be detected by sensors on worlds hundreds of light years away, but the Council's numerical advantage meant nothing when their ships could not coordinate properly. Dr. Nathan Rogers had upgraded his viral programs during the months since Sanctuary, and now they spread through the enemy fleet like a plague. Council ships found their weapons targeting their own allies, their navigation systems leading them into asteroid fields, and their communication networks carrying false orders that sent entire squadrons in the wrong direction. The turning point came when Dr. Benjamin Clark activated his ultimate weapon, a network of hyperspace disruptors that completely surrounded the Sol system. Any ship trying to escape would find their hyperspace drives disabled, trapping them in normal space where human forces could hunt them down at leisure. The Council fleet was caught in a trap with no way out. High Counselor Zethran watched his mighty armada fall apart around him as ship after ship was destroyed or disabled by human forces. His own flagship was surrounded by smaller human vessels that moved too fast for his gunners to target effectively. When boarding pods attached to his hull and human marines began cutting through his armor, he finally understood that his empire was doomed. The surrender came not from the military commanders but from the Council members themselves. As news of the battle reached their homeworlds, panic gripped the populations who had been told for generations that the Council was invincible. Rebellions erupted on hundreds of worlds as oppressed species finally found the courage to fight for their freedom. Admiral Frank Carter stood on his bridge and watched the last Council ships lower their weapons in defeat. Then he opened communication channels to every world in the galaxy simultaneously, using the networks that humanity had compromised years earlier. His message would be heard by billions of beings across thousands of star systems. He spoke directly to the people of the galaxy, not to their governments or rulers. He told them that they had seen tyranny defeated and that the choice was now theirs to make. They could continue to kneel before those who saw them only as resources to be exploited, or they could stand up and reclaim the freedom that was their birthright. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Revolution erupted. Across the galaxy, a species that had endured Council rule for thousands of years finally rose up against their oppressors. The underground emerged fully from hiding, coordinating resistance efforts with precision learned from human military advisors. Within months, the Council's empire had collapsed completely. Some member species fled to the galactic rim while others surrendered and begged for mercy from the people they had oppressed. A few tried to maintain their local power, but they found themselves facing human-trained rebels who had learned effective tactics for fighting superior forces. President Richard Hayes announced the formation of the Galactic Liberation Alliance, a voluntary confederation based on mutual defense and free trade rather than conquest and exploitation. Species could join if they wanted to, leave if they chose to, and govern themselves according to their own values and traditions. Commander Jake Morrison stood once again at the observation deck of Earth Station Alpha, but now he watched as diplomatic vessels from dozens of grateful species arrived to establish peaceful relations with humanity. The silence had been broken, the price had been paid, and the galaxy would never again submit to the rule of tyrants. The Council had tried to silence humanity because they believed isolation would break the human spirit. Instead, they had given humans exactly what they needed: time to prepare, motivation to excel, and the moral authority that came from defending the innocent against overwhelming odds. The greatest mistake the Council Maid was not underestimating human technology or military skill. It was underestimating the human refusal to abandon those who needed help, even when helping them meant sacrificing everything. The price of their arrogance was the loss of an empire that had ruled for 10,000 years, brought down by a species they had dismissed as primitive and irrelevant.